For 3,000 years, humanity was quiet, not hidden, not absent, just quiet. When humans first stepped into the wider galaxy, they arrived without banners or war fleets, no ceremonial armadas, no declarations of dominance, just exploration vessels, trade ships, and diplomats who spoke carefully and listened far more than they talked. The older species noticed them, of course. At first, humanity was interesting, a short-lived species from a high-gravity world, emotionally intense, historically violent. Their own archives showed endless wars, collapsing empires, and near extinctions. Many galactic analysts predicted humanity would burn itself out within a few centuries. But something unexpected happened. They stopped. Humanity reached the stars and then chose restraint. They signed treaties. They followed borders. They avoided conflicts they could have won. They built no visible war fleets. They mounted no planetary cannons. And slowly, quietly, the galaxy lost interest. Among the elder civilizations, beings who measured time in tens of thousands of years, 3 millennia was nothing, a blink, a footnote. Humanity became background noise, a harmless species that traded honestly and asked for very little. In the Galactic Military Index, humanity was ranked low. In strategic simulations, they were often removed entirely to simplify calculations. Some analysts joked that humans were a solved variable. No one laughed louder than the empires. In the halls of the Concord, ambassadors would pass the human delegation without stopping. Their seats were near the outer rings, far from the central powers. When debates turned to security or warfare, human representatives were politely ignored. What could they possibly contribute? They had no fleets worth mentioning, no legendary commanders, no history of interstellar conquest. Even pirates avoided human space, not out of fear, but boredom. There was nothing there worth stealing. Human systems were calm, predictable, empty. The galaxy mistook that emptiness for weakness. What they did not understand was that emptiness can be deliberate. On Earth, the silence was intentional. Children grew up learning history, not the heroic versions, but the brutal ones, the wars, the genocides. The cities burned in the name of flags and gods and fear. Humanity remembered exactly what it was capable of when survival felt threatened. That memory shaped everything. When humanity first encountered alien civilizations, the reaction was not awe. It was calculation. They saw empires built on conquest, species enslaved because they were inefficient, entire worlds erased because resistance was inconvenient. They saw the same patterns humanity had once followed, scaled up to a galactic level, and humanity made a decision. They would not compete loudly. They would not race to build visible weapons. They would not provoke attention. Instead, they would prepare, quietly. Human engineers joined Concord research initiatives and helped design sensor networks, carefully ensuring those systems could not see everything. Human mathematicians contributed to navigation algorithms, subtly inserting blind spots where none appeared to exist. Human psychologists advised on alien diplomacy, learning how other species thought, reacted, escalated. And while the galaxy watched human traders and diplomats, humanity built elsewhere, in places no one looked, in dimensions no one monitored, in simulations that ran without end. They trained fleets that officially did not exist. They refined doctrines never written down. They practiced wars that would never be fought, until one day they were. For 3,000 years, humanity rehearsed restraint. To outsiders, the silence felt comfortable, peaceful, predictable. To those who understood humans, silence was never comfort. Silence was pressure. A predator does not roar while stalking. A storm does not announce itself while forming. And humanity had learned, painfully, that survival was not about showing strength. It was about choosing when to reveal it. The first real mistake came when an empire finally grew bored. The Valkyrie Dominion had slept for centuries, secure in its superiority. When it awoke, it surveyed the galaxy and saw softness everywhere. Old rivals weakened, borders thin, resistance minimal. And then it saw humanity. 12 systems, no fleets, no defenses, 3,000 years of compliance. To the Valkyrie, humanity looked like prey that had wandered too far from protection. The decision was effortless. A declaration was prepared, cold, formal, certain. When the message was sent, it echoed across every human world at once. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy noticed humanity again. What it did not notice was how calm the response was. There were no emergency broadcasts filled with panic, no public mobilization, no visible movement of ships, just silence, the same silence that had existed for 3 millennia. Only now it was different, because this time, humanity was no longer waiting to see if the galaxy would make a mistake. They were waiting to see how badly. The silence everyone forgot was a silence before an answer. The declaration arrived without drama. There were no explosions, no ships crossing borders, no warning flares in the dark between stars. At precisely the same moment across all 12 human systems, every active channel was overridden by a single transmission. Screens flickered, conversation stopped, music cut mid-note, then the image stabilized. An alien face filled the displays, ancient, armored, and utterly unconcerned. Its eyes were black and unblinking. Its voice filtered through translators that struggled to soften the authority behind every word. I am High Archons 3 of the Valkyrie Dominion. The title alone carried weight. The Valkyrie were not new conquerors chasing relevance. They were old enough that entire civilizations had risen and vanished beneath their shadow. Their borders were written in the remains of defeated species. I address humanity, the Archon continued, because your era of exemption has ended. There was no anger in his tone, no excitement, only certainty. For 3,000 of your years, you have occupied territory granted to you by the Galactic Concord. You have been tolerated, observed, measured. A pause followed, perfectly timed. We have measured you. Across human space, people watched in silence. On Earth, city streets grew still. On distant colonies, workers stood frozen between tasks. Military officers recorded the transmission without reacting. The Valkyrie Archon leaned slightly closer to the recording device. You possess no meaningful fleets, no defensive platforms, no weapons capable of delaying even a fraction of our forces. That much, at least, was accurate. According to everything the galaxy could see, our dominion has consumed 16 civilizations. Their worlds serve us. Their people either adapt or vanish. The Archon did not raise his voice when he said it. He did not need to. You will surrender all human control systems. You will submit to evaluation. Those deemed useful will be integrated. The rest will be eliminated. Another pause. You have one cycle. The transmission ended. Just like that. Observers expected chaos. They had seen it before. When other species received similar ultimatums, their reactions followed familiar patterns. Panic broadcasts, desperate diplomatic pleas, emergency fleet deployments meant more to soothe fear than to stop the inevitable. Humanity did none of that. There were no public speeches from world leaders filled with defiance or reassurance. No mass evacuations. No visible mobilization that alien sensors could detect. To outside analysts, this was baffling. To the Valkyrie, it was confirmation. They hesitate. One Valkyrie strategist observed. They are unprepared, another agreed. A compliant species, the Archon concluded. They always hesitate. The Dominion's fleets began to stir. Inside human command structures that officially did not exist, the reaction was measured. No alarm screamed. No officers shouted orders. A single phrase passed through secure channels, older than most human languages. Conditions silent no longer. It was not a call to arms. It was a transition. In the public record, humanity appeared passive. In reality, something ancient and carefully restrained had begun to shift. Hidden arrays activated without producing detectable energy spikes. Deep space nodes synchronized clocks that had been counting quietly for millennia. Simulation-trained crews were gently extracted from lives that had felt entirely real moments earlier. No one celebrated. No one panicked. They had known this day would come. Humanity had never believed peace was permanent, only conditional. When analysts in the Galactic Concord reviewed the lack of response, debates erupted. They're frozen, some argued. They're negotiating internally, others speculated. A delayed surrender. One elder species concluded dismissively. No one considered the possibility that humanity was calm because fear was not part of the equation. Fear requires uncertainty. And humanity had prepared for this exact scenario longer than the Valkyrie Empire had existed. One cycle later, the Valkyrie received humanity's reply. It was not a speech. It was not a threat. It was not even a demand. 2 words, broadcast back along the same channel that had carried the declaration of war. Proceed. The Archon stared at the message longer than he intended. Around him, advisors exchanged confused glances. Clarify, one suggested. Perhaps their translation failed. Another offered. The Archon dismissed them with a flick of his claw. No clarification is needed, he said at last. They're resigned. He gave the order to advance. What the Valkyrie never questioned was why humanity had not argued. They did not ask why a species with no visible weapons showed no fear. They did not wonder why 3,000 years of silence ended with only 2 words. They assumed humanity was accepting extinction. They did not consider that humans, when finally forced to respond, did not waste words on the inevitable. The declaration had expected fear. What it received instead was permission. The galaxy believed it understood humanity. That belief was built on charts, treaties, trade logs, and censored data collected over 3,000 quiet years. It was neat, predictable, comforting, and completely wrong. Humanity never lied about being peaceful. They simply never explained how they stayed that way. When humans joined the Galactic Concord, they studied its systems with care that bordered on obsession. They volunteered experts for shared research. They helped improve detection arrays, hyperspace monitoring, and threat assessment algorithms. Every improvement was real. Every contribution was valuable. And every system had limits. Limits humanity understood better than anyone else. They did not blind the galaxy's sensors. They taught them what not to look for. Human shipyards did not exist in observable space. They existed in gravitational folds too stable to register as anomalies, hidden inside mathematical dead zones where scanning noise was considered natural background distortion. Human fleets did not patrol borders. They waited in layered dimensional pockets, anchored to reality but invisible to it. Crews lived entire lifetimes inside adaptive simulations, training endlessly while believing they were at peace. Human weapons were not power down. They were dormant, designed to activate without warning, without buildup, without signatures that would trigger preemptive detection. To the galaxy, humanity appeared unarmed. To humanity, appearing unarmed was the weapon. The doctrine was older than their first interstellar engine. It came from Earth. From centuries when humans learned that strength shown too early invited escalation, that obvious defenses became targets, that survival depended on preparation no one could see. So humanity adopted a rule. Reveal the full shape of your power, asterisk, asterisk. Never allow an enemy to know when the war has already been decided, asterisk, asterisk. When the Valkyrie Declaration arrived, it activated protocols no alien archive contained. Command structures rose like shadows from beneath civilization itself. Not martial governments, not juntas, administrators, engineers, analysts. The same people who had overseen energy grids and transport networks now synchronized weapons platforms hidden inside those systems. The same scientists who had optimized medical nanotech repurposed it into battlefield triage systems designed for wars humanity hoped would never happen. There were no parades. There were checklists. In deep command layers, historical files were reopened, not triumphs, failures, wars where hesitation had cost billions, conflicts where restraint had been mistaken for weakness, invasions that could have been prevented if preparation had been complete instead of symbolic. Humanity remembered every one of them. They did not intend to repeat the lesson. To Valkyrie intelligence, Human space remained empty. Scouts crossed borders and saw nothing. No fleets assembling. No defense grids powering up. No communications traffic suggesting panic or mobilization. Exactly as predicted, Valkyrie tacticians concluded they have nothing. What they failed to realize was that humanity had never needed to assemble its forces. They had been assembled for centuries. The first Grave Fleet did not launch. It awakened. 10,000 ships transitioned from theoretical existence to operational reality in less than a second. Crews returned from simulated lives with perfect recall of decades of training. Systems came online without error because they had been tested millions of times in environments more hostile than real space. The fleet did not announce itself. It moved. Elsewhere, more fleets stirred, each one positioned not for defense, but for inevitability. Human strategy did not seek to repel invasion at the border. It sought to make invasion meaningless. The goal was not a fight. The goal was to end the concept of attack. The galaxy continued its debates. Analysts argued over human psychology. Scholars cited ancient texts about short-lived species and emotional responses. Admirals dismissed humanity as a historical curiosity. All of them shared one assumption. If humanity were capable of real resistance, it would have shown it by now. They did not understand that humans only revealed their strength after an enemy committed fully, after retreat was no longer possible, after the mistake became irreversible. In the quiet of folded space, a human fleet commander observed projected enemy paths. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm. "Hold position," she said. "No urgency. No anger. They're coming exactly where we expected." She paused and added, "Let them." Humanity had spent 3,000 years ensuring that when silence finally broke, it would not be a warning. It would be a conclusion. The Valkyrie vanguard crossed the boundary of human space without resistance. No alarm sounded across the stars. No defensive lines formed. No desperate transmissions begged for mercy. To Valkyrie commanders, it felt almost disappointing. Thousands of warships advanced in perfect formation, weapons charged, targeting solutions already calculated for planets that showed no sign of evacuation. The human systems ahead looked calm, too calm. "This will be brief," the Vanguard commander stated. "Record everything. Let the galaxy see what happens when a weak species refuses to understand its place." The order to advance was given, and then space changed. Not violently, not suddenly, precisely. Human ships did not arrive in waves. They appeared. One moment, Valkyrie sensors showed empty void. The next, their displays filled with human vessels, already positioned, already aligned, already inside optimal firing range. No hyperspace signatures, no energy spikes, no warning, just presence. Valkyrie targeting systems froze, recalculating data that made no sense. The ships surrounding them were not where physics said they could be. Distance values conflicted with mass readings. Motion vectors updated faster than processors could track. "This is impossible," one officer whispered. The human fleet did not respond to hails. They did not issue demands. They did not threaten. They did not announce themselves. They waited. The Valkyrie fired first. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously. Beams, kinetic strikes, saturation barges meant to overwhelm any defense through sheer force. The shots passed through where the human ships had been. Human vessels shifted position without acceleration, without inertia, without visible movement. They were simply elsewhere. Then the humans fired. Not in rage, not in desperation, in sequence. Valkyrie shields failed before warning systems could trigger. Entire cruisers vanished between sensor refresh cycles, removed so completely that command logs struggled to confirm they had ever existed. There were no explosions, just gaps. Gaps where ships had been. Gaps where command hierarchies used to exist. Gaps spreading outward with terrifying logic. Valkyrie formations broke apart as commanders attempted to regroup. Human ships adjusted calmly, herding enemy vessels into invisible kill zones defined by mathematics rather than aggression. Every counterattack was anticipated. Every retreat path was already blocked. Every tactic the Valkyrie had refined over millennia was neutralized within minutes. Humanity had studied them for 3,000 years. They knew how the Dominion fought. They knew how it panicked. A Valkyrie command ship finally managed to broadcast a message, unfiltered, unpolished. "This is not battle," the voice said, cracking with disbelief. "This is execution." The transmission ended mid-sentence. Observers across the galaxy watched in stunned silence. What unfolded did not resemble war as they understood it. There were no heroic charges, no turning tides, no desperate last stands. There was only systematic erasure. Human ships moved with the inevitability of gravity, indifferent to fear, immune to intimidation. They did not pursue fleeing vessels with fury. They simply removed the concept of escape. Time passed. Minutes felt like hours. Then it was over. Where a Valkyrie fleet had entered human space, only debris remained, cold, drifting, silent. Human losses were negligible. Human communication remained minimal. A single message was transmitted back along the original declaration channel. No threats, no explanation, just a statement. The response has begun. And across the galaxy, something ancient and unshakable settled into collective understanding. Humanity had not ended 3,000 years of silence because it wanted to. They ended it because someone had finally proven they no longer deserved mercy. The war had not started. It had already been decided. And now, the galaxy was paying attention. The galaxy expected escalation. After the first Valkyrie fleet vanished, analysts predicted retaliation, reinforcements, adjusted tactics, a second, bloodier phase of war. That assumption came from experience. Wars, as the galaxy understood them, were conversations made of violence. One side struck. The other replied louder. Power was measured in how long the exchange could continue. Humanity did not continue the conversation. They ended it. The main Valkyrie armada arrived in human space 3 days later. Hundreds of thousands of ships. Enough firepower to sterilize stars. Enough mass to blot out sensor rays with sheer presence. The Dominion believed the first defeat had been an anomaly, an ambush, a trick that would not work twice. They were prepared now. Humanity allowed them to arrive. No border resistance. No warning shots. No dramatic last stand near populated worlds. The Armada advanced deeper, confident that this time the humans would be forced to defend something that mattered. That was when the trap closed. Human fleets did not charge. They converged. From vectors that defied navigation logic. From depths of space Valkyrie sensors insisted were empty. From angles no strategist would ever choose. Because no known ship could survive approaching from there. Human ships emerged already interlocked into combat geometry, so complex it looked organic. Not lines, not wedges, a living pattern. Valkyrie commanders tried to issue orders. Those orders never reached their fleets. The first weapons humanity revealed were not destructive. They were subtractive. Valkyrie command nodes went dark without warning. Not destroyed, asterisk disconnected star. Entire sections of the Armada lost coordination in seconds, reduced to isolated ships with no shared awareness. Then came the second layer. Weapons that did not burn hulls or shatter shields, but rewrote the space inside them. Ships imploded silently, crushed by forces their designers had never imagined existing. The third layer followed. Precision. Human weapons fired sparingly. No wasted shots. No spectacle. Each strike removed exactly what needed to be removed. Nothing more. It was not brutality. It was control. The Valkyrie tried everything. They regrouped. They flooded space with autonomous weapons. They attempted mass ramming maneuvers designed to overwhelm by sacrifice. Human fleets adjusted calmly. Sacrificial ships were intercepted before impact. Autonomous swarms were neutralized by signals that turned them inert. Mass charges dissolved into confusion, as their targets, simply, were no longer where they had been aiming. Within an hour, the Armada stopped advancing. Within 2, it stopped functioning as a fleet. Within 3, it stopped being Armada at all. Across the galaxy, observers watched something unprecedented. A civilization that could annihilate its enemy chose, instead, to dismantle it. Valkyrie's ships were not chased when they attempted retreat. They were allowed to flee, after their weapons were removed, after their drives were crippled just enough to ensure the message would spread. Humanity wanted survivors. Survivors were more effective than wreckage. At the center of the collapsing battlefield, a human commander transmitted a final message. Open channel, unencrypted. It was brief. This outcome was avoidable. You were warned. There will be no further demonstrations. Then the transmission ended. Human fleets began withdrawing before the last Valkyrie ships had even escaped sensor range. No cheers followed. No victory broadcasts. No claims of dominance. They simply left. In the aftermath, the galaxy struggled to process what it had witnessed. The Valkyrie had not lost a war. They had lost the right to wage one. And humanity, the quiet species, the overlooked traders, the harmless neighbors, had demonstrated something far more terrifying than rage or cruelty. They had demonstrated that when forced to fight, they could end everything, and still choose not to. The sudden dominance was over. What remained was silence. Not the old, forgotten silence. A new one, the kind that follows understanding. The war ended without ceremony. There was no galactic announcement declaring victory. No monuments raised in orbit. No celebration days added to human calendars. From the outside, it almost looked as if nothing had happened at all. Human ships returned to their hidden positions. Gray fleets slipped back into folded space. Weapon platforms powered down and vanished from every sensor net. Humanity did not expand its borders. They did not seize Valkyrie worlds. They did not demand tribute. They did not claim leadership of the galaxy. They simply stopped. The Valkyrie Dominion did not recover quickly. What remained of its fleet limped home carrying something more damaging than defeat: understanding. Their empire had been built on fear and inevitability, on the belief that resistance was pointless. That belief was gone. Their neighbors knew now that the Dominion could bleed. The conquered species knew they could be freed. And the Valkyrie themselves knew they had made the worst mistake possible. They had awakened something they could not control. In the galactic concord, the atmosphere changed. Delegates who once ignored human representatives now paused before speaking. Not out of fear exactly, but caution. Careful attention replaced casual dismissal. When humanity spoke, the chamber listened. When humanity said nothing, the chamber listened even harder, because silence had meaning now. Human diplomats returned to their old routines. Trade agreements resumed. Exploration missions restarted. Cultural exchanges continued, as if the war were a distant storm already past. To many species, this was unsettling. They had expected demands. They had expected dominance. They had expected the rise of a new empire. Humanity offered none of it. What they offered instead was restraint. Privately, humanity debated. There were voices that argued for security through control, for preemptive dominance, for ensuring that no one would ever threaten human space again. Those voices were heard. Then they were rejected. Humanity remembered why the grave fleets existed in the first place, not as symbols of pride, but as safeguards against extinction, tools meant to prevent genocide, not enable it. They chose, once again, to keep the dragon asleep. Years passed. The Valkyrie withdrew from conquered systems under Concord supervision. Worlds long stripped of resources began slow, painful rebuilding. Humanity assisted quietly: logistics, medical aid, reconstruction teams. No banners, no speeches, just help. Those who asked why received the same answer every time: because it is enough that the war ended. The galaxy adjusted. Disputes involving humanity were resolved diplomatically. Threats vanished from official language. Even the most aggressive empires began reconsidering doctrines built on intimidation, not because humanity demanded it, because everyone remembered what happened when humanity was forced to respond. In human history, the conflict was recorded carefully, not as a triumph, as a warning. Children learn about the war not through heroic stories, but through lessons on restraint, on preparation, on why peace was chosen despite the cost of power left unused. They learned that silence had once saved their species, and that breaking it had nearly changed them forever. Far beyond map space, grave fleets waited, silent, dormant, ready. They did not patrol. They did not threaten. They simply existed, as proof that humanity would never again be erased quietly. The galaxy never forgot the lesson. The quiet neighbors were not weak. They never had been. They were patient. And patience, backed by absolute capability, turned out to be the most powerful force of all. The silence returned. But this time, everyone understood what it meant.